Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in January. However, I'm not going to be talking about all the books. That's a lie. We'll come on to that in a second, but it feels really strange to be sitting down to film a monthly wrap-up because I haven't done one of these in a while. I used to film monthly wrap-ups every month back when I first started my channel. However, last year I switched to quarterly wrap-ups because I thought that would be easier, and then I found out that it wasn't easier. So for 2023 I thought I would switch back to doing monthly wrap-ups. However, I'm not going to talk about every single book that I read within a month within these wrap-ups. Basically, I think the problem that I used to have is that it would take me a really long time to film a monthly wrap-up, and I would feel like I was repeating myself because a lot of the books that I was talking about were books that I'd already talked about in vlogs and stuff. But then I also know that not everyone watches reading vlogs, so I would be stuck in this kind of middle space where I'd want to talk about books and give like a summary of what I'd read within a month, but I didn't want to spend ages going through books that I had already talked about. So yeah, basically this year what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through all the books that I read in the month quickly and just give my rating for each of them, and then I'm going to pick out a few highlights that I want to talk about in more detail, and hopefully that's going to be a better filming process, and hopefully it's going to be a much more fun video to watch. There will be timestamps in the description just in case you want to skip around or if there's any particular books that you're interested in hearing about. However, I'm going to start with some quick reading stats. So in total I read 9 books in January, kind of. There's one book that I'm actually still reading and I'm filming this on the 4th, but I've only got like an hour and a half left of the audiobook, so I'm going to count it towards my January numbers. So yeah, I read 9 books in January. 3 of those were fantasy books, 1 was a science fiction book, then there were 2 thrillers and 3 romances. So yeah, not a bad start to the reading year. I did have a few 5 stars in January, which I'll come on to, but the first book that I read in January, I've put these in the wrong order, but the first book that I read in January was Lost in Time by A.G. Riddle, which I gave 3 stars, maybe closer to a 3.5. Next, I read The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang, which I gave 5 stars. I then read The Marriage Act by John Mars, which I gave 3 stars. Again, I think it was closer to a 3.5. I also read The People Next Door by Abdullah, which I gave a very high 4 stars. Honey and Spice by Babalola, I also gave a very high 4 stars. And then Set on You by Amy Lea, I gave 3 stars. Infamous by Lex Croucher, I gave 4 stars. Then Fool's Errand by Hobb, I gave 5 stars. This is the first book in the Tawny Man trilogy, and I really enjoyed this a lot more than I was expecting. Then I also read The Majority of Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which is a reread for me. I read it for the first time back in 2021, and I gave it 5 stars when I read it the first time. I'm probably not going to re-rate this when I finish it because I've been listening to the audiobook and I've not been enjoying the audiobook as much as when I read it physically, so I don't want to bring my rating down because of that. And also, this is a mystery and I already know the outcome of the mystery, so again I think that's affecting my enjoyment. However, I have been really enjoying recapping this and reminding myself of the characters, and I'm very excited to read Hellbent once I finish this. I'm hoping to pick that up within the next week. So those are all the books that I read in January. I'm now going to talk about a few of these in a little more detail, and the first book that I actually finished in January was Lost in Time by A.G. Riddle. This is the Goldsborough special edition, which has the most beautiful stenciled edges, and I gave this 3.5 stars. Like I said, I did enjoy it. However, I feel like this has been a little bit mismarketed because I went into this expecting it to be be a science fiction book, and it is a science fiction story. However, I would describe this more as a mystery. Like, I would recommend this more if you're looking for a mystery that has science fiction elements. So basically, this book follows a guy called Sam, who's a scientist, and he was part of this team that created this machine that's able to throw people back in time. And initially they thought this machine was pretty useless because most people who want to use a time machine want to be able to predict where they're going to land when they go back in time. However, they ended up selling this machine to governments around the world who are now using these machines with criminals. So if you commit a serious crime, instead of going to prison, you now go in this time machine and it flings you back to the age of the dinosaurs. So crime has pretty much been eradicated because no one wants to end up going in this machine. Sam has a teenage daughter called Adeline, who I think is around 18 or 19, and at the start of the book, Sam and Adeline are accused of murdering his colleague, who he was also in a relationship with. So this book is part survival story, but also it's a murder mystery where you're following mostly Adeline, to be fair, as she's trying to uncover who actually committed this murder and what actually happened. The main reason why I think this book has been a little bit mismarketed is because the dinosaur element of this was actually quite minor in comparison to the rest of the story. I also felt like the first half in particular was too fast-paced. So because this is a thriller, there's some very tense moments, or there's moments that are meant to be tense. However, because it was so fast-paced, I felt like there wasn't really time to linger on what was happening before we were moving on to the next thing. So yeah, I wasn't really loving this in the first half. However, I really liked the direction that this went in. It really surprised me. It got very twisty at times, and yeah, I also liked the ending. It didn't end how I expected it to end, which is obviously a good thing. It's what I want from a book, especially when I'm reading a book that has a very strong mystery. I want to be surprised, and so I would recommend this, especially if you like fast-paced time travel-y thrillers. The next book that I wanted to talk about is The Sword of Kaigen by Wang. So I think this was probably my favourite book that I read in January, and I picked this up on a bit of a whim. It wasn't on my January TBR. However, I felt in the mood for an epic fantasy that I could really sink my teeth into, and I ended up really enjoying this book, and I love that. I love it when you pick up a book completely randomly and it ends up becoming a new favourite. I think I'm gonna end up putting this on my favourite books of the year list. So this book mostly takes place on this mountain where all of these warrior families live, and their job, I guess you could call it, their purpose in life is to protect the wider empire. So there are all of these warrior families, and they can use elemental magic. So the people within this community, or most of the people within this community, can use ice magic, so they can create weapons out of ice. There's two main characters that we're following. The first is this woman called Masaki, who is married to the second son of one of the main warrior families within this community, and then we're also following her teenage son, who I think is around 14 or 15. I think what I loved most about this book was how it's not just about the climax of the story, it's also about what comes after that. It was so emotional, and I thought the character development was really clever and really well written. I came to really care about these characters, and I did feel quite emotional at times. It made me cry, which it's not difficult to do, to be fair, but I do like a book that makes me feel so connected to characters that I feel everything that they're feeling. The only criticism that I had for this was to do with the ending. So this is a standalone, but it's also a prequel novel to another series that the author has written, and there was some stuff towards the end where I could tell that the author was trying to tie this book into this other series. However, I don't think it was needed, and I actually found it quite jarring, especially because from what I understand, the author isn't actually writing any more books within that series. series. I also wanted to mention, because of the type of world that this is, there's also quite a lot of sexism and misogyny, so just something that I wanted to mention in case that's not something that you like reading about. I mean, I didn't like reading about it, but it made sense within the context of this world. Also, content warnings for sexual assault and also miscarriage. Like I might have said though, I do think this is going to be one of my favourite books of the year, and I would be interested in reading more books by this author if she comes out with anything else. I don't know actually if she's planning on publishing any other books. This is also self-published as well. I don't think I mentioned that. The next book that I wanted to talk about is The Marriage Act by John Mars, which is my most disappointing book of the month. I say that, I still gave it 3 stars and I don't regret reading it. However, I was expecting to love this a lot more than I did, because this is a kind of sequel to the one. It's not really though, because you can read The Marriage Act even if you haven't read the one. However, the one is one of my favourite thrillers of all time, so The Marriage Act for me was a 5-star prediction, and to give it 3 stars, it was a little disappointing. It's basically set in the not so distant future where couples now have the opportunity or the option to upgrade to something called a smart marriage, and that basically means that you get access to certain benefits that single people don't have access to. So you can live in better housing areas, you get better healthcare. However, the downside to this is that you are monitored by the government, and if they think that your relationship is in trouble, then they can intervene. It's been compared to 1984 by George Orwell. I'm questioning myself, is it 1984? I always forget the date within that book title, but yeah, it's been compared to 1984, I think, by George Orwell, because the main theme of this book, I guess, is Big Brother is always watching you. So I was expecting this to be about relationships in the same way that the one was. However, it's more political and there's a big focus on government control, which, yeah, wasn't what I was expecting. However, I still liked the way that this was very fast-paced and there was a few twists. However, the twists weren't as good as in the one, in my opinion. One of the things that I loved about the one is how it followed all of these different points of view, and I found every single perspective really interesting and really engaging. However, The Marriage Act, even though it has a similar structure in that you're following all of these different characters, I didn't care about all of the characters, and it wasn't that I didn't care about them, it was that some of the perspectives I found a little bit dull and predictable. Some of the characters I did still like. I mean, like is probably the wrong word, because I think the characters were meant to be unlikable, but some of the characters I did still find interesting, and I really enjoyed the social commentary, especially the social commentary around influencers and social media. I think I will still pick up other books by John Mars, but this was just not my favourite by him. Another thriller that I read in January was Those People Next Door by Abdullah. So this is her latest release. It came out in January and I read an arc of it through NetGalley, but I have read all of Abdullah's books that she's published so far, I think, and I think she's an author for me now. I have enjoyed all of the books that I've read by her. I don't think I've gave any of them 5 stars, however this was very close. So this follows a main character called Salma who moves to the suburbs with her husband and their teenage son, and within the first few weeks Salma begins to suspect that their next door neighbour might be racist. So she talks about it on social media and it kind of goes viral, and it's basically a domestic drama about these two families and the building tension between them, and things start to escalate until tragedy strikes. Even though I would describe this as more of a domestic drama rather than a thriller, there were still some really great moments of tension throughout this, and there were some moments of suspense that had me on the edge of my seat. I also really enjoyed the audiobook. I actually accidentally requested both the audiobook and the ebook through NetGalley, so I listened as I read read physically on my Kindle. What I enjoyed most about Kia Abdullah's other books was how she wrote courtroom drama, and I really liked the legal aspect in Those People Next Door as well. My only very minor complaint was the pacing didn't feel consistent throughout the story. I felt like it was quite slow in the beginning and then it was too quick towards the end. However, I would really recommend this, and I would really recommend Kia Abdullah's books in general. I think she's really underhyped, especially on BookTube. I very rarely hear people talking about her books, but I think more people should pick them up because I think a lot of people would really like them. The final book that I wanted to talk about was almost my favourite book of the month. It was definitely my favourite romance book that I read in January, and that was Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola. So I did a whole vlog where I read 2022 romance releases, and this was my favourite book that I read in that vlog. It follows a main character called Kiki who runs this very popular radio show at her university, and her whole thing is that she gives people relationship advice. The love interest is this guy called Malachi who Kiki kisses at this party one night, and it causes some problems because Kiki not long ago blasted this guy on her channel. She spoke about how he was a player and he was bad news and people should stay away from him, and yeah, people start to question her integrity because they think, well, she only said that because she wanted him for herself. So they end up in this sort of fake dating situation, and I love fake dating as a trope. It's one of my favourite romance book tropes, and I loved the chemistry between the two main characters. I thought that they had a lot of chemistry, and I also really liked the side plot as well. I won't say what it is because I don't think it's really mentioned on the blurb, and I didn't know much about it going into it, but I love a romance that has a strong romance with amazing chemistry between the characters, but it also has a strong side plot as well. I think it can be quite difficult when it comes to books that are set at university or college to get the balance right where the characters feel like they're acting their age, but they don't feel so annoying that it's frustrating to read about, and I think that this book got the balance quite right. Would definitely read other books by this author. I have read her anthology, Love in Colour, and I really enjoyed that too, so I'm excited to see what she comes out with next. So that does bring me to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments what was the best book that you read in January and what was the most disappointing book that you read. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this wrap up and what you thought of them. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me, but otherwise I will see you next time. Bye!